All right, thanks. So yeah, please go ahead and put the phone on the vibrate. There are restrooms here, but if you don't want to disturb, you can go downstairs for men's and ladies' rooms. And Dr. Frawley has been very gracious enough to donate a lot of very good books for our temple. And in return, we expect that you would pick up a book that you want and donate generously right there. We'll set up the book in shortly, but in the break or after that, we will have enough time to go and look around and pick a book and donate generously as much as you feel comfortable. And I think this never went into the newsletters or anything, but after the discourse and discussions, we have dinner for everybody. So please stay back and we can enjoy informal, chatting with Dr. Shastri and have dinner together. Okay? If you have any other questions, you can ask me now. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Dr. Frawley. Again, thanks very much.
Namaste. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Are we well audible here? A little closer? Okay. We won't, yeah. How is this? Okay. Om, om, om. Okay. You all set?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll begin with a Vedic chant. So let's draw in our energy and awareness. And also close eyes. Remember that besides the outer world we see through our senses is an inner realm of boundless light and consciousness. We're not saying you should give up the outer world, but please remain and develop the awareness of your inner light. Om Gananaham Tva Ganapatikum Havamahe Kavim Kavinamupamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanu Tibisida Saptanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinhavaditamastu Ma Vidvishyavahai. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Namaste. I'm very happy to be with you at the Hindu Temple Society of New Mexico. And so very happy to know this organization exists, that it is continuing to grow, and you have new land to develop even further. So I look forward to seeing you flourishing in the future. I'm in an unusual position in that I've lived in New Mexico more or less, majority of the time, for now nearly 40 years. At the same time, my main work has been progressively in India, Bharat, particularly since probably the early 90s. But even before that, I began studying the yogic and Vedic teachings back in the late 60s as part of a certain generational thing. But I took it, I studied at a deeper level, Sanskrit, mantra. I was able to connect with many great gurus, Sri Anandamayi Ma, MP Pandita Aurobindo Ashram, and then many, many more. And I spent more time in India Also, I began writing. It was Pandit of the Aurobindo Ashram about 1980 that began publishing my works extensively in India. And then over time, been involved with a lot of educational projects there and East and West. On one hand, I've played the role of bringing these Vedic teachings, yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta to the West. And I've played the opposite role of helping to reawaken the same teachings in Bharat, because often they would say they were more interested in hearing something from somebody from the West than from one of their own teachers. Or as they once said, we only accept something once it's re-imported. So that has been my job. And then I've worked and done programs all over India and with many different publications, organizations, including many that are in the West. I'll just mention them briefly because some of you may be involved with them. Swami Narayan organization, which has built all these magnificent Hindu temples. We also helped them with their displays and did a book with them for their Delhi Akshardham. Yesterday, I did a webinar with the Chinmaya Mission. They're doing out of Mumbai. They're doing a 9-day festival from Chaitra Shub Yugadi, the Yugadi to Ram Navami, which is we're in this period now. And I did a dialogue with Swami Mitrananda, who runs the Chinmaya Youth Movement and is also heads their center in Chennai. And we discussed Sri Ram and Ram Janmabhoomi, and many other groups, Aurobindo Ashram, Raman Ashram, Kanchi, Sringeri, Ramakrishna Mission, ISKCON, so many groups, and a lot of the gurus. One of the gurus I admire the most today is Swami Avdeshanand, who runs the Juna Akada, the largest. He has like 700,000 sadhus under him, including the Naga Babas, and he organizes all these Kumbh Melas, and many other national organizations we've worked with. And we've also, on the educational level, been involved with a lot of the schools and universities, from JNU and Delhi University to new things coming up, Nalanda and Sanchi universities, and a number of the organizations like the Indian Council of Historical Research. Next week, I'll do a program on Sri Aurobindo with the Indian Council of Philosophical Research. And then we've done work with Ayush, the Ministry of Ayush, and recently somewhat Harshvardhan is a friend of mine, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So back and forth, we've also been involved with a lot of the yoga ashrams, centers in the United States. And we've also been involved with spreading Vedic teachings through Europe, through Russia, through South America, even a little bit through the Middle East. So in Santa Fe, I haven't done a lot. I go into the mountains a lot. Our programs are more online. We haven't been operating a center for people to come, but we also have done a lot of programs in different parts of India. My wife, Shambhavi, has organized a lot of programs above Rishikesh and the Himalayas, the Kumaon, and all of that. And I've also spoken before, a lot of the Hindu students groups, etc. So we've had kind of a long period here. So it's interesting for me to be in New Mexico and see this particular organization coming up. I'm very happy to see that. New Mexico has had a lot of other organizations and groups going on. So today I chose as a general topic this idea of yoga and Vedanta and the relevance of yoga and Vedanta in daily life and in the world today. Now, this is something that people in the West have kind of forgotten, but all the primary yoga teachers pretty much who have come to the West were Yoga Vedanta. In the West, we've kind of taken the yoga kind of out of its Vedantic roots and kind of more into the asana side. But we have to remember, Swami Vivekananda didn't just bring yoga, he brought Yoga Vedanta and he brought the whole revival of Hinduism and the Sanatana Dharma. Yogananda, they still had a very large self-realization fellowship, also brought in Vedantic teachings. And a lot of the gurus who came to America in the 60s in the Shivananda movement, including Satchidananda, Swami Vishnu Devananda, Venkateshananda, Jyotirmayananda, who's still alive, they called what they did Yoga Vedanta. Even ISKCON, the Krishna movement, is Bhakti Vedanta. And even Krishnamacharya, who they emphasize as their main asana guru in the West, was an acharya in the Vishishtadvaita tradition of Ramanuja and taught that particular tradition as well. And all his life, he carried a little murti of Narayan and did puja to it every day. And essentially, you know, if we look at yoga, yoga talks about practices, and there are texts. We've worked a lot with Yoga Sutras, Yoga Vasishta, many other texts. But this whole idea of union, self-realization, Purusha, the seer, that is Vedanta. In fact, I always say yoga is Vedanta because yoga is a smriti, Yoga Sutra smriti or darshana text, which all accept the authority of Vedas, Gita, and Upanishads. So yoga speaks about this union with Ishvara, with Purusha, with the higher self. But in the yogic text, there's more discussion of practices. The actual knowledge and theory is discussed in the Vedanta. And we've worked a lot, of course, with the works of Adi Shankara and have been to his, associated with them in Kanchi and Sringeri, as I mentioned. And some of the modern teachers like Ramana Maharshi. And we come from of a line of teachers connected to Ramana and also to Sadhguru Shivananda Murti, passed away a few years ago from Andhra Pradesh, Vizag, Bhimli, that particular area. So we always tell people that if you want to study yoga, you need to know Vedanta. Yoga without Vedanta just becomes a kind of personal practice rather than a way of self-realization. Or we say yoga is Vedanta is the consciousness, the mind of yoga. And Vedanta is the jnana yoga, or the yoga of knowledge. At the same time, Vedanta, most of what is called Raja Yoga is also Vedanta. And of course, the yoga of the Bhagavad Gita is all this Vedanta and Raja Yoga. People study Yoga Sutras. Patanjali says, Atta Yoga Anushasanam. This is the tradition of yoga. Sri Krishna in the Gita says, Aham Paratana Yoga Proktavan. I myself taught the ancient yoga. So part of our work is to bring the Vedanta back into the yoga. And also with that, the broader view of what we call the Vedic sciences. And that includes Ayurveda, Vastu, Jyotish, it includes the Sanskrit. It even extends into all the music and dance and the whole Sanatana Dharma, Bharatiya tradition overall. So Vedanta basically is very simple. Who am I? Or as they say, self-knowledge is the basis of all knowledge. And what is the one thing knowing which everything is known? And that one thing knowing which everything is known is you. It's you. It is yourself. And what do we mean by that? Atma. Because what happens to us is we don't know ourselves. We're always looking to the outside. As Upanishads stated, all the gates of the senses look without. So only a rare, wise person looks within. And today it's much worse. Why? Because besides the five senses, we have every possible media device, every possible electronic stimulation. We are wired to the external world, whether it's internet, whether it is work. And essentially, we have become, we human beings, we're social beings. But we lose our inner self and we become caught in our social identity and in the necessities of the outer world, which are important. I mean, human life is not easy. Human existence, we have all these biological needs, we have all these psychological, emotional needs. It takes 20 years of education for us to grow up. We have to function in society. We have to deal with health. We have to deal with finances. We have to raise a family. Where is the room for turning within or sadhana or self-realization? And at the same time, everybody has to do this, even the swamis. Sometimes we say that the swamis just have bigger families. It's not that they have gone beyond that. There's so many things to consider. And we live in a very crucial time in humanity, time of great crisis. We know the Corona crisis and all the changes of information technology. In fact, we used to be generationally divided by technology. When I was a kid in the 1950s, we had one television and we had a big family. And now you see what's happening with all the media devices and channels. And now almost every 5 years, the children are in a new generation and different things are happening. They don't develop memory, they cut and paste things. Power of attention. I recently wrote an article that was for a large conferences for the Hindu youth that came from the Livermore, Shiva Vishnu temple. And the topic I chose was the role of attention. Why? Because the most important thing you have in life is your power of attention. Now, to put that in yogic terms, we call it the dharana shakti. Without dharana, there's no dhyana. Without concentration, attention, you really can't do anything. So what is dharana? As a yogic practice is being able to hold your power of attention steadily on a single topic for one, or what they divided into different ways, more to 48 minutes straight in order to do that. Now, what is our attention span today? It's average scene in a movie is 20 seconds. It's probably less now. Computer games, milliseconds. So our power of attention is very low. The distracted mind is what Yoga Sutras called as vikshipta chitta. You're all over the place. Now, what happens when we are attentive to something? In fact, to some extent, even when you're distracted, you're being attentive. You're watching something, listening to something, being entertained. Being entertained is a kind of, you might say, you have an attention, but it's more at a level of rajas or even tamas than sattva. So what happens is you are taking in whatever that is. Whatever you are giving your attention to is occupying your mind. Or as I sometimes tell students, you will let people into your mind that you would never let into your home. What is worse, having the person being in your mind? You might even let them in your mind regularly that you don't let into your home. So what are we taking in through our attention, through our senses? Now, to some extent, we have to do that. And you can also be detached in what you observe. That is also pratyahara. I mean, if there's a fire going down, if there's some disturbance going on, you have to be aware, but you don't have to be taken in by that. So what is yoga? Yoga says, this defines itself, as many of you know, chitta vritti nirodha. And what does that mean? Chitta is the mind in all of its levels: emotions, instinct, reason, memory, subconscious, self-conscious, even aspects of intuition, higher consciousness, all in the field of the chitta. And yoga is very simply defined as nirodha. Now, if you read a little further, Nirodha is not just simply stopping the mind. It's very simply vairagya. It is detachment from the mind, or what I say, disidentification with the mind. You observe your mind. Mind is your instrument, just as body is your instrument. You have hands and feet, you have eyes and ears, you have instruments of sense organs and motor organs at a physical level, take you around the material world, get you to do things. But your mind is sort of like a computer. It has its memory bank, it has its word processor, it has its capacity for mathematics, and it has other things, emotion, imagination, prana, that of course the computer doesn't have, but it is also an instrument. So we not only need to turn within, we also need to be observant, detached, and aware when we are looking outwardly. What we see is something we need to observe and understand. As you know, we have this concept of Maya in the Vedanta thought, which is very much misunderstood. It says the world is Maya. What does it mean? Sometimes I also tell students that the world is Maya and the media is the Maya of the Maya. So you're into 2 degrees of Maya before you get started. Maya is an appearance, that's all. Your senses give you appearances. I look out, I see the clothes you wear. I don't see who you are. I don't necessarily see how you feel. If I haven't seen you before, I don't have that emotional or personal connection. So the world is a whole set of transient appearances like waves. The question is, what is the reality behind the appearances? And what is it that we call education is we learn how to examine appearances and see what is real there. When you look at what is the actual distance involved? What is the actual size involved? Getting to know someone, the difference between how they may appear on one day and who they are. We live in a world of advertising and propaganda. You have to discern the package from the reality, what something is hyped to be from what it actually is. So whole lives are examining appearances outwardly and trying to find out what is the best food, what is the best job, what is the best place to live, what are the characteristics, the activities going on around us that we could benefit from, what is the nature. But there is also inner appearances going on. These are the movements of our thoughts, emotions, memories. How much time do we take observing what is going on in our own minds? The mind is like a breeding ground. It is holding things, memories, emotions. Often people come to us and say, oh, I have this attachment, this problem. I'm angry, I'm anxious, I'm fearful, I'm attached. How do I get rid of it? And I say very simply, let go. If it's there, you're holding on to it. But the problem is we feed these things sometimes during the day. Say you have a dog who comes to the house, you just give him food once a day, he'll keep coming back for food. If you feed negative emotions, they will continue to grow. So what is occupying your mind? And of course, there's all the outer things, which may be things we have to do, or maybe things we're observing. And there's also the inner things, your stream of thoughts, your stream of awareness. So Yoga Vedanta is about examining the chitta, the mind, on all levels. What is there? The mind is sort of like a garage or a dumping ground. You just throw things there and let them stay there and forget that they're there. But anything in your mind is going to develop, or we say negative emotion will ferment. If you're holding to anger, if you're upset, if you're not willing to let go, it will continue to grow at a subconscious level, and then will eventually express itself at a conscious level. Mind, as even Lord Buddha said, is your best friend or your worst enemy. Your mind can be the worst terrorist, or it can be the greatest inspiration, depending upon how we orient it. So examining, understanding the mind. And something very interesting and transformative occurs. As you begin to look at the mind, you have detachment from the mind, and you develop a deeper intelligence that is kind of talking to the mind. Do you ever talk to your mind? Your mind is angry. Say, why are you doing this to me? Causing me all this trouble with anger. You know, why are you doing all these things? Because you don't question the mind. When we question the outer mind, the buddhi, the higher mind, comes into being. And we say witness. You know, all yogic meditation is the Sakshi Bhava, or the witnessing consciousness. But witnessing at what level? When most of us talk about witnessing, we're talking about the mind witnessing the mind, or one aspect of the mind witnessing another aspect of the mind. Or sometimes we say that when you set out the mind to find the truth, it's like setting out the thief to find the thief, turning the thief into the policeman. So we need that inner seeing. And when that inner seeing and awareness comes in, then we get a sense of the Purusha. Then we get a sense, Purusha is defined as drashta or seer. And the power of the Purusha, the seeing power, is called the Chitti Shakti. Now, when Yoga Sutras defines yoga and the movement control of chitta, it says, Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. Then the seer dwells in its own nature when you are not involved in the movements of the mind. You are watching the show. It's not the mind watching the show. You are watching the show that is the mind, that is the body, that is the external world, and is our life. But the interesting thing is that as we look out, you see, we have our inner seer, but the seer is all pervasive. Whatever you look at, there's an inner seeing looking back at you. And whatever we see in the world of nature, there is that cosmic awareness, Brahman, supreme reality behind that. Nature is the waves. In fact, sometimes we like to use that very simple metaphor. We are all living in an ocean of consciousness. And what we see are the waves on the surface of that ocean. Mind is also a wave. We see the waves and miss the ocean. So we have to say, you are not the wave. The ocean is not the wave. On the other hand, ultimately, the wave is nothing but the ocean, but it is not the entire ocean. So we're caught in all these waves and appearances, and we don't see the cosmic ocean on the behind nature, and we don't see the ocean of consciousness within our own hearts and behind the mind. So that is the Purusha, Atma, or seer. It's not the mind. It is able to observe the mind. Mainly we get caught up in the movements of the mind, identified with them. I am this is mine. I think this is right, I think this is wrong. We get caught up in that, we forget our inner being. We are caught in our outer becoming. So Yoga Sutras ends with this Chitti Shakti. And when it's rooted in its own nature, when we are holding that state of being aware, you can do many things. You know, many of you have heard in India, there's the Ashtavadani, or they also call them the Shatavadani. And the Ashtavadani, there's one we know, Chamu Krishna Shastri in Bangalore, they're tested. And you talk about multitasking, there are 7 things are going on at once. Somebody's reading a book, somebody's telling a story, and the 8th person is there just to distract them. And after a while, an hour, they have to recount everything that went on. Ashtavadani, someone who has an 8-fold awareness. Now, this is not a person who is distracted, but once you have a strong power of attention, you can address many things and subjects without losing the power of awareness. Even now, you can drive down the street. You have to think about driving all the time. You can use your mind for other functions. So this power of attention, power of witnessing, power of seeing. Today, we are hyper-reactive people. You're all supposed to have an opinion about everything, and an opinion you feel very strong about and easily get outraged about if someone else doesn't agree with you. I've been recently writing, we call this topic, it's in the Vedantic field, we call it psychological immunity. You know, you have a physical immunity of being able to endure heat and cold, being able to endure, ward off infectious disease, have a strong immune system. There's also a psychological immunity, being able to handle the dualities of life, up and down, gain and loss, fear and desire, like and dislike. Can we maintain our inner composure in dealing with difficulties? You know, Ganesha is the one who helps us overcome difficulties. And Ganesha is very much misunderstood this way. Ganesha does not remove your difficulties. Ganesha helps you understand and learn from your difficulties. If you're driving down a car down the road and there's a barrier put up because there's a big ditch, you don't ask for the barrier to be removed. You learn to go around the barrier as needed. Some difficulties need to be removed. So we have a deeper need for this psychological awareness and able to deal with all the challenges of life. What is a yogi? A yogi is not disturbed with flattery and insult. You insulted me, you insulted this. A yogi is observant. That doesn't mean we don't try to right the wrongs in the world, but we do so from a standpoint of awareness. And so Vedanta teaches us to be aware of our inner self. Yoga, in fact, the traditional definition of yoga in Yoga Sutras is yoga is samadhi. All 8 limbs of yoga are aspects of samadhi. And samadhi is the unitary state of awareness, developing powers of attention, consciousness, and the ultimate samadhi is the self, is the Purusha. What we call in the yogic literature, the nirvikalpa samadhi is the nature of the self. Savikalpa samadhi are involving activities of the mind, imagination, perceptions. So you must cultivate self-awareness. Now, we cultivate self-consciousness, self-image. In fact, we also cultivate now virtual reality. And many of us are willing to harm ourselves physically in order to do better in the social world. So what is the self? The self is the awareness behind all the thoughts, the witness, the substratum. It is there. I have given some copies of this book to you called Yoga of Consciousness. Yoga of Consciousness is discussing the 4 states: waking, dream, and deep sleep. Your inner self is aware during all these states. You are not just the self of the waking state. There is a self of dream, a self of deep sleep. The 4th state, the Turiya state, is the true self. And the problem is we're so engaged outwardly, we don't see or are aware or cultivate that awareness of the inner self. Shortest of Upanishads is called Mandukya, discusses this. And of course, it's also the basis of a lot of the Vedantic thought. And Yoga Nidra, true Yoga Nidra is being aware of your inner being throughout waking, dream, and deep sleep. Ordinary Yoga Nidra is using yoga to sleep better, which is also okay. But the ultimate Yoga Nidra is when we put the entire world to rest. It's like the Pralaya. It's like Lord Vishnu on Shesha. It's like Shiva and his Tandava. We recognize this inner being beyond all outer appearances. So in the Vedantic tradition, yoga, what is the first principle? We have this principle of satya. Satya meaning truth. What is satya? And we also have the principle of avidya. Avidya meaning not knowing or ignorance. which is not knowing of Satya. Satya is that which is always present, whatever endures, and is the eternal. So Satya is the eternal truth that we are seeking. It's also the relative transient truth. The relative transient truth, including science, including all forms of information, is asatya. That doesn't mean it's wrong. Or sometimes what we do is we discriminate between what is the higher truth, the paramartika satya, and the practical truth, which is the vyavaharika satya. Driving a car, buying things. All of these things are practical, but they don't have any ultimate reality. They are not the eternal. And then we have to move from avidya, not knowing, to vidya, knowing. But that avidya is lack of the atma vidya. It's lack of knowing who we are, lack of knowing our inner being. It is not just simply lack of information. So in that regard, as Upanishads say, the lower knowledge, which is avidya, includes everything in the realm of name, form, and number. So even all of our practical lives is a kind of avidya, a kind of not knowing or incomplete knowing. Whereas the higher knowledge is to know who we are. They say knowing the one thing through which everything is known. We're not going to know all information, but we can know the ground of being. So Yoga Vedanta is taking us back to the ground of being. We're involved in becoming. Becoming is the waves, being is the ocean. And also consciousness. Mind is not conscious. Mind has a lot of conditionings, karmic patterns, compulsions, has unconscious, subconscious, so many things. And we're often driven by thoughts. And you know, most of your thoughts don't belong to you. They come from the outside. I mean, after all, our speech, our education has come from the outside. The words are coming from the outside. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to understand where they come from and what is you. So this turning within and developing self-awareness, awareness of our thoughts. What are you breathing in your mind? Where are your thoughts going through the day? What are the main occupations, preoccupations of the mind? This is the yoga of knowledge. This is the foundation of the Yoga Vedanta. And we then recognize that, look, I am everything. Body and mind are instruments. Everything you see is a reflection of some aspect of your deeper nature. Paramatma, Parabrahma. It's not just about, we're all kind of reflections of that universal consciousness into an individual body-mind vehicle. We have our karmas, we have our samskaras, but we need to develop that inner consciousness and that inner life, that inner examination. And there are many teachings for that. There are many texts. There are many vidyas one can pursue. Ramana Maharshi is very famous for his asking the question, who am I? And it is not what do I own and what is my name and what is my job. These are things that you do or things that you are temporarily associated with. But what is the essence of your being? What is the eye behind the eye? What is the ear behind the ears, the Upanishads, the prana of prana, the speech of speech? What is the self that is the self of the self? What is the I in itself? What is the Atma Swarupa, the self nature, as opposed to I am this is mine, I'm going here, I'm going there. This is the great inquiry of the Yoga Vedanta. And also, we must remember that today we are being driven so much externally. We are even losing whatever self-awareness we normally had. So we say that what do we need today to function in this world of information technology and mass media, we need attention, power of attention, and we need consciousness. We need to be conscious of what is going on, which means we need to know how to observe. So yoga is the ultimate science of consciousness for observing body and mind, for observing the outer and the inner. And sometimes, there's this debate, what's of science? Did ancient India know? Did they have vimanas? Did they have surgery? All these different things. Science of consciousness was definitely there. Artificial intelligence is not going to save us. If your information is on your computer, if your knowledge is cut and paste, we are no better than the computers. We are just becoming functions of the media. The media makes noise and we get up and jump and do something. We may have one media or another that we prefer, but we need to develop that inner awareness so that we are using the media, this information technology, from a point of consciousness. And we are training our children, not just simply memory, data, information, manipulation of technical tools. We are also training them to be aware, to be one with nature, to have self-awareness, to know what we have within us that is beyond the mind, to know our creative powers. You're observing these things. You can observe, you can observe a table, a chair. You can also observe your body. You have hands, you have feet. These are also instruments. So in that regard, this developing of awareness through the Yoga Vedanta, through the essence of Hindu Dharma, is what the world needs. Swami Chinmayananda also taught all of that. We need that deeper awareness to master and use the technology. And the children have to be taught mantra, meditation, visualization, meaning of symbols, being out in nature. What is happening? We are aware of, we are caught up in two dimensions. We are looking at a surface all day long. What happens? You lose your depth of vision. Everything becomes black and white. Everything becomes a superficial image. We need that deeper vision, and that can also turn within. So that is why we've emphasized this power of attention. And that is why we say we need to have that inner learning going on, not only children, but also for adults. You have to study the teachings. You have to meditate on the teachings. You have to contemplate the teachings in order to make them your own, in order to change your mind. You can't just sit blankly. You can't just do a ritual by itself. So it's very important that along with the Hindu temple, that there's also this understanding and bringing in of the Shastra, the teachings, Gita, Upanishads, and their psychological and practical meaning. Yoga Sutras is not about simply giving somebody a theology or belief. It's how do you manage your own mind. Gita is one of the best texts you can ever find for managing the mind and emotion. This is your life. And we have to raise the children so they also know concentration, meditation, mantra, even ritual. What makes ritual important is that it's done with attention and awareness. Everything you do regularly is a ritual. The question is, what is your ritual? Is it going to the office? Is it watching a sports game? Is it going after the stock market? Or is it something that has a power of devotion to it? Even Yoga Sutra says devotion is one of the main means of developing that state. So that is my message to you as a place of initial communication, bringing in these practical teachings, practical Vedanta, power of attention, concentration, power of awareness, and restoring that connection with our inner self, and again for the youth, and also with the universal self. At least here we have the space, we have the mountains, we have the connection with the universal self. And in the connection with nature, we can also connect within and reclaim our own self. Apart from the practical world, your main purpose in life is sadhana, or developing a higher awareness for your own benefit, for society, for your family, and for the development of the species as a whole. So I will close my formal talk, whatever it was, and you can feel free to ask questions or interact as you wish, either on this topic or on any other relevant topic. Again, we see Hinduism as Sanatana Dharma. I don't see it as one religion among many. To some extent, it's not a religion in the Western sense of the term, or it's something more. It contains all aspects of vidyas, knowledge, art, science. Everything is a yoga, music, dance, all the rest of it. So it includes all of these, but Vedanta is the key. And if you want to explain what Hindu Dharma is to other people, you have to know the basics of Vedanta. What is Atman? What is Brahman? What is Ishvara? What is karma? What is rebirth? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha, panchakoshas, three gunas, purusha, prakriti. If you explain these things to people, they will be amazed, because the philosophy, the psychology, the teachings of the Sanatana Dharma are much broader than science. They're much broader than any other religion or theology that is out there today. Hari Om. Okay, we'll go from the front to the back.
Well, I have a practical question. I think you touched a very important aspect of Ashtanga Yoga, the seven-step dharma, and which is focusing. But Shastriji, the world we live in today, from Corona to political unrest and whatnot, it's easier said than done focusing something. Can anybody hear? Can anybody hear?
Maybe I should just
Yeah, take the microphone.
yeah, okay.
So,
I don't want to take too much time. Oh, before I forget, Shastriji is also a recipient of Padma Shri Award from India, and I think that's a very coveted award for somebody who's born and raised for a land that assimilating so much of our ancient knowledge. So my question was, he was talking about dharma, focusing on something which is one of the steps of Ashtanga Yoga. I think it's easier said than done, particularly a common man like me, from day to day. And it's hard to focus with your mind on something. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. So Swamiji, question I had, Shastriji, is that would you comment about usage of Japa Yoga?
Yes, yes.
Because, that's a repetition of something. And I mean, what basically is you have to make a Teflon mind. In other words, nothing sticks, which is come down the Pratyahara. But anyway, I don't go into all that. But if you can comment about if japa can help for a day-to-day person to follow on, that's the question I have.
Yes. That is a very excellent question. And in the writings and teachings I do, the main method of developing dharana shakti is mantra. Let me explain. Your mind is dominated by certain thoughts. But whatever becomes the predominant thought colors the mind as a whole. Take, for example, you get angry. Suddenly you're all anger. You go from 50% to 100% fear. Or even whatever else it is, the mind has that capacity to be absorbed into something. So what mantra allows is the ability to change the mind stuff from rajas, tamas to sattva. In Ayurveda, yoga, rajas and tamas are the doshas at the level of the mind. So creating the sattvic mind is done through mantra, but mantra also has to have an intention. There has to be an intention to learn, to know, some devotion, some bhakti behind it. But if you do the mantra, if that becomes your most common and dominant thought, then it will take the whole mind over. And the mind will become the mantra mind instead of the mad mind or the monkey mind. And you'll also note that we have certain dominant thoughts that keep coming back. Why are these attachments, fears, desires coming back? Is because they're going through your mind. So mantra is very important, and there are many mantras. I have a whole nice little book on mantra. You have simple bija mantras like Om or Aim, Hrim, Shrim. There's many of these Shakti mantras. You have name mantras which can be combined with devotion, Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Narayanaya, These are very important. And then we have all these extended mantras. We have great Vedic suktas, Gayatri, and Mrityunjaya mantra. And you also have the great stotra tradition in India, particularly in the south. In the south. In fact, I was going on. You can even I can get them on YouTube. For example, I found a very wonderful chant. It's to Matangi called Shamala Dandaka. It's a very long stotra, but these stotras also have their values. You have, of course, Shiva Mahimna. You have all these Anandalahari, Soundavihari. I like the stotra literature. I looked at it quite a bit. So you have these ways of mantras, not just you have the single syllable, the names, extended mantras. So I take these mantras, mantra to Ishtadevata, that eventually changes the mind stuff. And we also have jnana mantras, Om, Hamsa. We have a very powerful mantra we like to teach, Om, Hrim, Hamsa, Soham, Swaha. So this is one of the main keys, and it's particularly also good for children because the mind, you have to deal with at a fundamental level. Mind is made of sound. You change the vibration of the mind. You change the mind, and it can be done simply and easily, but it does take time. And it does also, the mind needs space going out into nature. So mantra is one of the main tools we have. In fact, mantra is the foundation of meditation. And I would also like to say, mantra is the definition of yoga. How is mantra the definition of yoga? If you read the Yoga Sutras, they say, who is Adi Guru of yoga? Ishvara. Of course, Ishvara includes Maheshwara, Parameshwara, Rajarajeshwara, any Ishvara, but it is all the same. But it says, what is the indicator of Ishvara is pranava. Pranava is not just Om, it is mantra and primal sound. Patanjali is also very famous as a Vyakarana. It's not just grammar, it's mantra. So yoga begins with mantra. Mantra is the foundation of yoga. And mantra is the foundation of dharana. Mantra merges into the silence. Mantra then is the basis of samadhi, aham, soham, om, it merges into that. So thank you for bringing that up, audio.
I have a question about mantra. So does the mantra have to be given to you by someone? Do you have to be initiated into it? I've been reading on the miscellaneous Facebook areas, Vedic, Jyoti Shankar, and Saptavishis, that if you pick up the wrong beach mantra, it can actually cause you harm. Is that true?
Yes, there is a science of mantra. There is a tradition of mantra.
Make it a little louder. I don't think anybody can raise me.
There is a science of mantra. There is a tradition of mantra. And it's always best in any tradition to have some direct instruction, okay? So that is there. And mantras are of different types. For example, if you want to do a Saraswati mantra to start a class, you don't necessarily have to have an initiation to do that. But for certain moksha mantras, or to really empower the mantras, initiation is very helpful. There is a curious temporary solution. There is one form, deity form, you can pray to for mantra initiation if you can't find that immediately. Do you know who that is? Anybody know? Dattatreya. Dattatreya. Dattatreya is also the patron deity for all this Juna Akada sadhus, for the wandering sadhus, for the avaduts, all of that. So our thing is you start with where you are, and there are simple Ishtadevata too. If you have a Ishtadevata, that's your choice. So you can also chant the mantra of that Ishtadevata, but always try to go deeper. Discover the mantra Shakti. And mantra Shakti is not just something that is going to be given to you from the outside. It's something you have to develop. If there's no truth in what you say, how can you have mantra Shakti? So there's also ways to empower mantra through water, through fire, through ovens, through pilgrimage, through tapas, through all these things. And I guarantee you, and if you ask some questions and go to teachers, you can find ways to support. There's also Jyotish mantras, but those are upayas. Those are not necessarily moksha mantras. They're given for specific purposes. So these factors are there. But we do live in an era in which it's hard to have direct contact with living teachers. We can also always find them on audio, video, and all of that. And the teachings are there. But we start, we go forward, and you will definitely make connections. And also there are some pradayas, there are traditions. And the traditions may hold to a mantra, Om Namah Shivaya. So once you join that tradition, then you also enjoy the line of the mantra.
Actually, there is one question online. So we'll take some questions from online also, because there are quite a few coming on the Zoom. So Nikita, go ahead.
So one question from the audience was, how do you reconcile the various interpretations of Vedanta, Ved, Advait, Achintya,
Ved,
Yes.
Advait, Achintya, etc.
Yes, how do we reconcile or deal with all the different interpretations of Vedanta? This is very interesting. First of all, we have to remember that the minds of all human beings are a little different. Nobody's going to see things the same way. Mind and body are different. They have gunas, they have karmas, they have samskaras, doshas, all of that. Consciousness is one. Atma is one. But that Atma is beyond concepts and beyond words. So whenever we try to put it in concepts and words, we put some limitations there to experienced in silence. And there are also people of devotional temperament, knowledge temperaments. My solution or my answer to Dvaita and Advaita is that the closest thing to one is two. And whether it's two or one, you know, that is an ultimate issue. And the ultimate issue is samadhi. It's an experience. And when you try to put anything into words to someone who hasn't experienced something. So we don't worry about that. And also different gurus. Some people say, oh, you like Aurobindo, he says that. You like Shankar, he says that. It's a contradiction. I says, it's also an art. The two artists, you can appreciate a different artist painting. They're not going to have the same lines. They're not going to use the same colors. You look at them in their own right. And the ultimate is an inner inspiration that you're seeking, an inner knowing. And we don't need to worry about the details. Even talking with the Buddhist, you know, I've been involved in some of these university projects, Sanchi, Nalanda, in which the Tibetans were also involved. And one of the Tibetans teachers, Lama Senten of the Sarnath school, we were having this discussion. And he said the point, he said, look, all dharmic traditions have the same values and practices. They have different philosophies. But what do the philosophies say? Is that you must go to samadhi to experience the ultimate truth. And in that state, the differences of words cease to be that important. Languages change, words change, philosophies change, minds change. I wrote books a few decades ago. I have to change the words today because our language has changed. So follow the inspiration and pursue your inner knowing, and outer details you don't need to worry about that. If the teaching resonates with you, fine. We don't need to reconcile 5,000 years of philosophy in order to go forward on the path of Vedanta. You need to know yourself. Once you have the center, you can have the periphery. If you try to have the periphery and expand it, then you lose your center. Hari Om.
You could come forward.
My question is, in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks Sri Krishna, Bhagavan Krishna, what are the characteristics of a Sthita Prajna? Now in answer, he says, Atman Yevatmana Tusha, Sthita Prajna Dojyate. So what is the meaning of that Atmanadrishta? I would like to know.
Okay.
About
It is one who has merged the self in the Paramatma. What is the nature of Atma? It's very interesting. In some of the older texts, they connect Atma with Akasha, space, and Akasha with Ananda, Atmananda, Akashananda. So at that level, Stita Prajna, then one is absorbed in that Atma. But that Atma is not just kind of an entity. It's not just a person. It is the essence, the rasa, rasovasa. It's the essence of everything. So when we look out, as they say, you see there are 5 things. Satchidananda Namarupa. We see the Namarupa, we forget the Ananda. What does an artist do? For an artist, a bowl of fruit on a table is not something to eat. It is elements of design. They get a rasa. You go to a deeper level of rasa, there's ananda behind that. So being absorbed in that atmananda, see, Stita Prajna, because then everything is a manifestation of atmananda. But ananda is not this funny type of jumping up and down in trances and, ananda arises from shanti, the extension of shanti. So that deeper rasa is what they're talking about there. Stita Prajna is also defined in various ways. And the important thing is, again, that we know ourselves and that we learn about ourselves, not as one person opposed to another, but as this being consciousness that pervades everything. Adyan.
You want the mic or you can just say it loud?
I can just ask. I'm wondering how early children can taught meditation, because in this society, it seems like they don't teach children meditation until they're older. They say they're not capable, and I'm thinking that they are.
Yes. Yes, children and meditation. Children also have a mind, they get absorbed in things. And basically what we always tell people is if you want to teach children meditation, you have to take them out into nature a lot. You have to get them to learn depth of vision, look at the sky. You have to teach them how to differentiate different plants from one another. You have to teach them to be open to these forces, sun, moon, and that there's a sacred presence in these. Then children can learn how meditation is an extension of contemplation. And that is what we do for them. And there are other things, mantras, chants, they can learn, but you can't teach them in this kind of structured intellectual way. It has to be part of it. And ritual is very good for children. Participating in offering of ghee lamps, incense, abhishek of the murti, stories of the devatas, Hanuman, all of that. Hanuman is Buddhiman. Hanuman also teaches meditation. He's also Vatakmaja. He's also the Lord of prana. So you have to immerse them in that whole culture of that is part of that. And then meditation will be part of it, but it has to be introduced as part of their life and experience, not as kind of a technical subject from the outside.
So 6 or 7.
Anytime. And when you have a child, they have an infant, chanting can go on around them. First words, you can teach them Om, or you can teach them Om as one of their first words. You can take them on pilgrimage. That's also very good. You can take them to temples. You can visit sacred sites. You can tell them, Ganga is not a river, see? The rivers have the devatas, all of that. So it should be there all along, but the technicality, your children are children. They have to allow to be who they are. You can't try to turn this into a technical issue. On the other hand, the youth needs to be given more structured form of meditation and also cultivation of memory. And of course, self-remembrance is very important, but they need to memorize things, particularly if they're dealing with a subject. And of course, we require that with subjects like Ayurveda or whatever it is, but they should also be taught that they have to memorize learning languages, all of that. So there's much that can be done. And cultivating attention.
Another question from the audience was, are there any tips on increasing attention?
Are there any what?
Tips on increasing attention.
Tips on increasing attention. Right? Tips. And very simple things. One, your power of attention is like a muscle, right? You can't tell someone who hasn't lifted 10 pounds, you can't give them 100 pounds to lift. So there's certain things, holding a mantra for a minute, holding a mantra for 5 minutes, holding a mantra for 10 minutes, doing a mantra 100,000 times in one sitting and consecutive sittings, going out into nature and say, this is a very more extended thing. So take a young person and you go out at night before sunset and you gaze at the sky and you continue to gaze at the sky until the stars come out. So there are simple tools, gazing, tratika, gazing at the ghee flame. You may combine that with a mantra. So there are many little tools. A yantra, visualizing yantra like Shri yantra or anything else you want to visualize. And even pranayama, because the power of prana and the power of mind go together. If you can sustain the repetition of a mantra through pranayama, then it gains more power. So there are many things that you can do and have your own mantra. And during the day, every hour, every tea break, whatever it is, at least spend a few minutes to recall the power of the mantra. And also to give power to the mantra before you go to sleep. And the first thing when you get up in the morning. Make a very powerful sankalpa first thing in the morning and last thing before you go to sleep at night. And this will help develop the power of attention, consciousness, awareness over all.
Yeah. Yeah, affordable. Yeah, so my question is, I'm kind of intrigued by what you mentioned, science of mantra. And I have a nephew who's kind of studying this, how the science of Om and other mantra affects the brain. So my question is, are people thinking about making mantras in other languages? I mean, like, is there a mantra in Russian or in Chinese?
Okay, your question. Yeah, your question is about mantra and mantric language, and can other languages be used in a mantric way?
Yeah, so why should we teach?
Yeah, okay, let me answer that. Okay. Now, we do have in all languages poetry. Poetry is kind of halfway to mantra, you could say. It's an energization of a sound with a deeper meaning and symbol, or often multiple meanings. For example, Vedic mantras can have 7 levels of meaning. The academics get to the half of the first one and think they've understood what it's about. But I would have to say this, Sanskrit is a mantric language by nature, okay? Sometimes I have students do a simple exercise, we don't have time, but you chant Shanti, Shanti, Shanti for 5 minutes, and then you chant peace, peace, peace for 5 minutes, and see if you have the same peaceful vibration. I sometimes tell people in English, peace is a truce between wars. In Vedas, there's all these Shanti mantras, and what are they asking for peace from? The mountains, the sky, the rivers, the sun, the moon. the universe of peace, not just, agreements or disagreements between human beings. So Sanskrit has that power. Bija mantras have these powers. We have these powerful Shakti bijas like Hrim. Hrim is Devi bija, and Hrim is Maya bija. Has so many meanings, Hridaya, Surya. So they have greater power in Sanskrit. Now, that doesn't mean the other languages can't use things mantrically. And mantric, there's two factors in the mantra. One is the sound, and the other is the meaning. So obviously you can energize different sounds with the same meaning. But when sound and meaning coincide, that's also the foundation of poetry. So Sanskrit has more of that. So that's going to affect the mind and the nervous system differently. And Sanskrit is connected to the nada, the vibratory forces, om, aim, these. And you see, again, we have the levels of sound. You can definitely have the Vaikari, the spoken words, you can have a little bit. But when you go to Pashanti, when you go to the illumined sound, there has to be that deeper correlation of vibration. And then the deeper nada, para, you're actually going even beyond sound altogether. So Sanskrit is important. You can do something similar with other languages, but it's not quite the same thing. And this is something else I want to bring out too, is that you cannot understand yoga, Vedas, Vedanta, Sanatana Dharma by the language of Western theology, philosophy, psychology, or even science. There can be some crossover. Even say, if you want to understand modern physics, you can't use the language of engineering, or you can't use the language of other systems to do it. They have their own language. So many of these terms for understanding Atman, Brahman, even Ayurveda, Vata, Pitta, these are untranslatables. You have to learn to understand them. We have many of these terms. Some, like karma, guru, have come into the English language. They may be distorted. But we have to insist upon understanding what these terms actually mean in order to understand the teachings overall. And we can certainly respect poetry of various types. Mantric statements people can make, PowerPoints, there's even kind of a devolution on the mantric approach. But there's a certain power that the Sanskrit language has, I think, that we need to respect. There's also some slight difference between the Vedic Sanskrit and the classical Sanskrit. Vedic Sanskrit has some other things, some other vibratory things, and also recognize that language continues to evolve and energies, meanings can be developed. Hari Om.
Yes. Okay. So this question is from Dr. B. So he asks, Guruji, do you offer classes on these topics? I'm a representative of NM of SBYAS University, located in Bengaluru.
Located where?
Guruji, and visited.
Oh, yes, I know them.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
I've known them.
So do you offer?
I've known them forever. I have a delit from them, Nagendra and all this, everybody I know. We're involved with them. The main issue, and I've taught there, the main issue is time. So we are involved with some webinars for different organizations. We've put all of our things online because time is a factor, and teaching individual classes is time consuming, in particular if we have to be there in person. But there are many good institutions. It's important that these continue. We work with the Namu Vyasa, Chinmaya Mission, many others. And it's important that we sustain these Vyasas. Also starting a school in Los Angeles, and we have some connection with them there also. I wish I had more time. We've been involved with a number of the schools in India and to some extent here. But we have at least books and articles and audios and things and online classes. And if anybody has questions, we do try to address them. One of my problems is though I work in too many fields.
Doctor came here to see if there's something here also, but they're finally doing it in LA.
Yes. Yeah, we met them here. So I've done webinars with Nagendra. We did some on the coronavirus issue.
Next question.
Yes, okay, doctor. My question is about concentration. You did talk about having 45 minutes of dedicated time towards an activity. So I have a dog. She'll come and sit next to me and look at me, and then suddenly the cat walks by, she'll turn and go, cat, 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 and then she'll look at me. And then the bird flies, and she'll look, bird, 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 and then she'll look at me. This is how, I'm not saying my mind works like that all the time, but it's difficult to concentrate. Do you have any advice on how to stay on track?
Yes. How to stay on track. We have so many things going on. In fact, you can multitask. That's not a problem. The issue is you have to do so from a standpoint of continuous awareness. Or we even say moment. Well, in fact, often I like to define yoga as moment by moment awareness. That doesn't mean you have to focus yourself on one point all the time. It means that you have a power of attention that you can use as needed. And we also talked about the example of the Ashtavadani, who was able to, if you have a deeper self-awareness, you can do things. Let's go back to the idea of the muscle. If you can't even lift a small weight, you can't do much. But if you learn to lift a very heavy weight, then you can do a lot of things. So the power of attention has the flexibility. Now, what happens in the movement between dharana and dhyana? We can compare dharana with the fixing of the gaze. Okay, it has a point. We can compare dhyana with hearing, listening. It has a periphery. So dharana is the point. Dhyana is extending that to the periphery. When you're listening, you're open. So you have to combine these, and you have to have a power of awareness that is not distracted or disturbed. So in the beginning, you have to kind of develop it on one thing. But once you have that power of awareness, you can use it multiply. And that's why yogis can have knowledge of many different subjects rather than just one. So if the cat, the dog, etc., are all together, you can have a peripheral awareness that includes them all in the greater embrace of meditation. Adil.
I just wanted to ask if, with all the electronic devices around us, are they compromising or to be able
Yes.
to do anything special?
Yes. I'm very glad you asked that question. How do we deal with all the electronic influences around us? Not only the electronic influences that are around us, but the ones we're taking in. Computers, cell phones, watching the media. We are electrified most of the time. And unfortunately, some of the young people, the music is on all the time. And then we have the additional complication that we are also having drugs, medicinal drugs, recreational drugs, stimulants, even food that is stimulated. So we are in a situation where we're being stimulated from the outside in a very extensive way. Now, along with that, we have an epidemic of depression. I've written quite a bit on that. And people ask me, what's the cause of depression? My answer is stimulation. You're overstimulated, you'll just kind of wear yourself out. So the fact is very simple. We need to develop our prana to counter that. Okay, importance of pranayama. Now, besides, we talked about whatever impressions you're taking in through your senses, through the media, this has an electrical form. But so you have to go out into nature. In fact, I like to tell people before you go to sleep at night, go out into nature, do pranayama, do some puja, renew your mind and renew your prana. In the morning, exercise, going out into nature. We have to sustain that positive prana, to use the language of Ayurveda, otherwise we're aggravating Vata dosha. You're just disturbing your own pranic field. And there's always a relationship between prana and the mind, or we say breath and the mind. You have what is called the prana spanda, or the vibration, the movement of prana, and the chitta spanda, the vibration, movement of chitta. Yoga Vasishtha talks about this a lot. So what happens is that the two go together. So if your prana spanda is electrified, your mind is electrified. If your mind is electrified, your prana spanda becomes electrified. So we need to expand the breath, expand the awareness, create space. We have to deal with these electric forces, so we have to know how to let go of them. There's other tricks. You can have Brahmi tea, you can have Tulsi tea, you can have a murti or a yantra by your computer to look at, but you need to compensate for that in some ways. Take showers, you need to chanting, because what is the main organ that we have, sense organ, motor organ is speech, main motor organ is speech. So that is going to affect all the other motor organs. It'll also affect the mind. Mantra also, and again, first thing in the morning before you go to sleep, also make to energize these forces. Take retreats into nature during the year, or pilgrimage, or on weekends or in evenings. That's what these temples are for. What is the puja room for? You have the devata, and you're creating a sattvic environment. What is the puja doing? It's also having the fragrances, it's also having the flowers, it's also having the lights, the incense, so many things to create the positive tanmatras, the sattvic tanmatras, because this tanmatric sensory essences, there's a whole science to that. If we get, if all of those are artificial, like I tell people, junk impression does to the mind what junk food does to the body. You have to have natural impressions through nature, through spiritual practices, yoga, meditation, pranayama, all these things. And we have to compensate for it. Even wearing masks. If we're wearing masks a lot during the day, you need to do pranayama in order to renew the prana, because breathing back your own air, some factor of apana comes out. I'm not saying you shouldn't wear a mask, or they're not necessary, but we have to do the compensation for the aromas, the sandalwood oil, put that on your forehead. There are ways that we can do that. The Yoga Ayurveda has a lot of these keys.
Okay, you mentioned about rituals. And today with younger generations, they have a lot of questions about the ritual. They say, I'm very spiritual, but ritualism is a part of that. Can you expand on the importance of ritualism?
Yes. Well, first of all, we are all performing rituals. Our rituals are our regular, repeated daily activities. Brushing your teeth, eating your food. And we also have a lot of the people who are against rituals, then they have watching their sports games, going to movies, they have their different repeated activities. Now, ritual means that what you do with awareness. And by awareness, we mean also an honoring of the sacred. Then there's a special meaning. We're not talking about a mechanical ritual. And there are also simple rituals that you can do, lighting incense, lighting a ghee lamp when you meditate. There's also big rituals that are done at temples and other things that have their own particular power. So ritual is what we do. In fact, what does karma mean? Another meaning of karma is ritual. What is karma yoga? If you read a karma yoga book, part of it's about dharmic living and right timing, all these things. Other parts is about ritual. And ritual also means interconnection with life and nature. Morning and evening, new moon, full moon, seasons, harmonizing ourselves with the sacred movement of time. There's a whole science of sacred time and creating sacred time and sacred space. If you live in mundane time and mundane space, you will be mundane. If you create sacred time and sacred space, we can transcend. See? We don't have to be always numbered and controlled. So ritual has that importance. And the young people have their rituals. They have their dances. They have their programs they go to. They have their communities. Even a game is a kind of a ritualistic group. They share certain things. So ritual is part of life. We just have to make it living. And whatever you do with consciousness becomes a ritual, becomes important, that you're not just doing it mechanically. So, in fact, the other issue then comes is idols. Okay, idols. First idol is your own body, by the way. That's the first one that we have. And what we have to understand is that every image, everything is an image or a symbol. It's very interesting. Say you go to a church, and many nice churches in New Mexico, they have images. They don't call them idols, but what's the difference between an image of Jesus or Mary or Krishna and Shiva and Devi? Calling one an idol and another a sacred icon is prejudice. You know? What essentially is you're honoring the image as a symbolic representation. And what does Hindu thought teach us is it's much more detailed. The deity has its dhyana murti, its representational image. This can be visualized, or it can also have as a murti form. And it also, we teach that you energize matter with what you do, with your attention. If you have a room where you play games, it has a certain energy. If you have a room where you watch movies, if you have a room where you meditate, it has a different energy. So we energize the form with consciousness. And then that allows a connection with the subtle energies. The deity has its representational form. It also has its yantra, which is its visualization, which we call that's what we call drishti yoga, and also a very important part of dharma. It also has its mantra, its tantra, its teaching. The deity is not physical. The deity exists at all levels. And so you have a representational form that you use to energize. Otherwise, we're just energizing our attachment to our body or other bodies. Then you also recognize that you can create a sacred presence through the ritual and a sacred space through the puja. And you create a space for transcendence. You create a sattvic environment. If our environments are defined by rajas and tamas, Vedanta teaches something very simple, is that human beings are by nature rajasic and tamasic. Nature is by nature sattvic. So we want to bring in the subtle factors, the tanmatras, the art, the music, all of that. So that is what we need to consider. Even ritual, art, dance is a ritual. Anything that becomes an art is a ritual. Anything you do with intent, sacrament. Samskara also means a sacrament. When you have an important event, marriage, laying a foundation for a house, you bring in a higher energy if you bring in the ritual, the mantra, the practice. Or with Vastu, you're dealing with sacred space. You know? There are certain rules there. You know? Northeast is Ishana direction, so the greater spiritual energies come in. Northeast time of the day is Brahma Muhurta, as a correspondence is also there. There's certain, you have your biological rhythms, you have your natural rhythms of time, and we are now so artificial, we lose track of these things and we don't know what is going on. That's why all these festivals have their importance. You know, Ram Navami, actually there's now, the spring Navaratri is going on. There's not just the autumn Navaratri that is going on. And that makes it, when life becomes, see, even sadhana contains ritual. Sadhana is a kind of ritual in that you're doing it in a regular way. You can even have just simply a manasika puja. You can have a mental puja that you do. And then also pilgrimage, you go to Kailas, Mansarovar, you go to the Char Dham, you know, we've been to all these places. It has a different effect because the energy of the people, the rishis who were there, is still alive, is still held there because the matter holds these things. So people need to know these, and then these things will have meaning, but it can't be done mechanically, and it can't be done, you know, simply forced from the outside. Hariam.
I have a comment. You don't have to answer any questions you don't answer. And rituals translates into power of the will. I mean,
Power of the will.
yeah, willpower.
Yes.
And ever since I was a young adult, I always wondered, and not to vex anybody here, the Muslim, the Islam, I've known a lot of people as friends and whatnot. One thing I've seen, whether they're really religious or not, but they will do namaz for 5 times a day. We have 3 to call Sandhya. And I wondered right from the childhood that what is that thing in them? And again, we don't have to answer any question. The power of the will developing in this culture so much to challenge the powers like England and America. What I'm saying is that this ritual, I guess it has some power. I don't know. You may have to just contemplate on this.
Well,
And this
let me
one
answer
thing
that.
really astounded me about the Islam.
Let me answer that. Well, first of all, any repeated action gains a power. And it can be sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. Look at the military. How does the military operate? Regiment. See, that's what it's about. Training. So we want to have training, but we want to have it at a sattvic level. And willpower. See, there's different types of willpower. The ego-based willpower is to get the goal of the ego. Become famous, to become rich, all these things, which gives us, it's a rajasic quality to it. The true willpower is not to have any desires or need anything. And the true willpower is the willingness to let go, to transcend. The need to control, to conquer the world, to convert. These are still in the field of rajas and not in the field of sattva. So tapas is what is required. And tapas is also self-control, disciplining the mind, having control of the emotions, not having enmity towards anybody, honoring the sacred in all, not reducing ourselves to a name, form, number, position, organization, institution, but having that inner power. Now, what's happened today is the children are not given the sattvic approach to ritual. Even the criminal activity, they have gangs, they have things they do. There's a regimen that goes with. There's loyalty. Look at the mafia. All these things are going on as a certain use of willpower. But we need to create satya sankalpa, and we need to create the yoga sankalpas, and we need to create the sankalpas towards peace, harmony, well-being, universality, because willpower is also a force that can be used for good or bad. And we can only use it for good when we align our will with the universal will, and not just simply make it something personal achievement. Basically, we have a society where the majority of the people are more in the tamasic mode because we're spectators. Someone else is running our lives, occupying our minds. And then we have some rajasic people who have the power and are telling us what to do and gaining the adulation and things for it. But sattva is not developing. If we do that, then we definitely have to have discipline. And one of the reasons, you can't just let children do what they want. You have to give them a positive discipline or something that engages them. I had a friend who was a great piano player. He's turning his son, and I said, how do you do it with your portal? He says, basically, sit him down at the piano. He's 2 years old. He's got to deal with it. So we have to take some discipline and create a sadhana base. Sadhana is the ultimate ritual, the ultimate discipline. And if we do not value our teachings and our traditions and don't practice in our children, are not going to do that. And you will see that, why is it that all over the world, you can go to any, I've been to all these countries. In fact, you have a lot more interest in the Hindu Dharma in Russia than you do in the United States, even without the Hindu diaspora. All these countries, Brazil, you have people, they like mantra, meditation, chanting, all these things, because they have been exposed to them from a place of inspiration rather than a place that this is the family duty that we have to perform. So all these things have to be enlivened. And basically, you are the product of that which what you're doing at a regular basis. And so it's very important that these forces set in motion have a sattvic and yogic basis. How do you? Yes?
Okay, so we have a question from Anirudh. The question is, so, Namaste, I've learned Vedas and Upanishads. And I'm continuing to learn more every week. Each time I chant and practice what I have learned, I'm in awe of what Sanskritam, Vedas, Upanishads, and Samhitas have to offer. How do you think we should use Vedic science from Vedas and Upanishads and apply them to our today's technology in our day-to-day life, like modern technology, computer science, etc.?
Yes. Yes, he's asking about how to apply the Vedic knowledge to science. Well, the first place I say we should apply Vedic knowledge to science, including Yoga Vedanta, is psychology. Science of mind. You can study psychology from a Freudian, Jungian, or just from a psychiatric angle, use of various medications. But if you look at the system we have, whether it's Chitta Buddhi, Manas, Ahankara, whether it's Panchakosha, whether it's Savikalpa, Nirvikalpa, Samadhi, the science of mind and consciousness is much better developed in the Yoga Vedanta, also in the Buddhist tradition, Jain tradition, than it is in the science today. And many scientists have recognized that. And we also, so if we want to study, we start with the science of consciousness. Science of consciousness as psychology, but we also have a science of consciousness which we can relate to cosmology, ontology, that is also there in the Vedanta. And some of the great physicists recognized that in their affinity with Vedanta, the Gita, and all of them, Heisenberg and Oppenheimer, even Einstein to some degree. So there is some correlation there as well. And also I tried to tell with science is and science needs to embrace certain holistic realities like prana. For example, in biology, in biology, physiology, there's no prana, they don't recognize it. The difference between living and non-living is more complex chemistry. But we say there is an actual life force that pervades the entire universe. And of course, knowledge of who we are and what is the purpose of our lives, what is the nature of the universe. Vedanta has a lot to teach, but it's not just teaching outer things, relative to development of technological instruments, that sort of thing. It's the inner technology. We have inner senses as well as outer senses. And even with the technology, we need a consciousness beyond the technology to use the technology. Otherwise, we do become artificial intelligence because the technology is telling us what to do. We have a creativity that's also there. Vedanta is an art as well as a science. Yoga is an art as well as a science. Even look at the Natya Shastra, all the details, every gesture has a meaning. Look at the Sanskrit language, every word, every letter has a meaning. Vibratory energies and the connections. Nada Bindu, what is the connection of the philosophy? We've always said that everything is particle and wave is a particle and a particle is a wave. And all the waves are in the particle and all the particles are in the waves, or vice versa. You have this vibratory universe of consciousness, Akasha. Akasha is not just space. Akasha is a field of energies, vibrations. Here's something that, why do we worship all these nagas, right? Why do we have all these serpents everywhere? It doesn't look very nice, does it? What is the universe according to modern physics? Wormholes in space, right? And what is the body? Nadis. Nadis, prana flows. So all these nagas represent prana. And even in the Vidyut, they're Vidyut Shakti. Shakti is Vidyut. You even find this in all the yogic texts. They're forms of prana, they're forms of nadi, they're nadis, they're electrical forces. There are other electrical forces. For example, you not only can connect yourself to your internet, you can connect yourself to Mahatattva, the universal mind. We're not talking about Parabrahma. We're talking about the source of all the universal laws and energies. There are various ways to connect beyond time and space. So this is what the Vedic sciences also teach us: science of sound, science of prana, science of form, symbol, all these things. And then we can recognize that we are the universe. As the Upanishads say, the entire universe dwells in the Dahara Akasha, the small space within the heart. There's an interesting discussion in the Brahma Sutras. How do we become infinite? They say, how do we understand this supreme reality? And the discussion is very simple. There are two ways. You can expand to the infinite, or you can become infinitesimal. You can become a single point. To become a single point is easier. If you can become a single point, that single point will expand to infinity. That is what the meditation teaches. How do you?
I have another question, sort of follow through what Samirda had asked. This is mainly, how do we make our current or a new generation or the younger generation very strong Hindus in this country, because it has become more and more important to represent ourselves as a Hindu community.
Right.
So if you have any advice on that for the current generation.
How to honor the Hindu tradition more. It's interesting because, I've been working with these traditions in India for the last 40 years. And so I've seen what's happened in India. There has been a great revival going on. And you finally have a prime minister who will openly be a proud Hindu. Before they were Hindus, but they didn't want, it had to be something they kind of did in private. And then they go to a mosque to prove they're secular, or they, so this is, you have to understand what this tradition is. And we can make it in a few simple points. Hinduism is the world's oldest religion and spiritual path. It is the most diverse. I often tell people there are more religions inside of Hinduism than out. We recognize one reality, but we have more deities than everybody else. We have more temples, more sampradayas, more gurus, more sadhanas, and we emphasize individual spiritual experience, not mass belief. What is a sadhana? It's your individual spiritual path. The deity, Ishta Devata, you choose the one that you're connected to. It's not one guy for everybody or else, And our tradition is of self-realization, knowing yourself. But as I say, we honor the self. It's not a tradition of one thing as opposed to another, one identity as opposed to another. Self-realization is the goal. Understanding the universe as conscious, not just simply something on the outside to be manipulated. The universe is a single person. We are different functions of that single person. And so many gurus, teachers, show me any other tradition in the last 200 years that has a comparable figures to Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, Dayananda, Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, Anandamaya Maha, Shivananda, Chinmayananda, the great Shankaracharyas of Kanchi, Sringeri, the Paramacharya of Kanchi. I met him several times. There was also the Acharya of Sringeri before he was also had the same name, Chandrasekhar. His works were also extraordinary. You have the Swami Brahmananda of the Jyotirma. So look at all of those figures. Yogananda, who came and stayed in America, manifestations of the teachings. The children have to be taught. The problem is the textbooks are not teaching what Hindu Dharma is, and they don't teach Vedanta. And for example, I found so many textbooks talk about Manusmriti. Manusmriti is an ancient law book of over 2,000 years ago. And I tell people, well, why don't you teach Christianity by the book of Leviticus in the Bible? Even Islam has a Sharia, which is enforced. You can teach them that. But Manusmriti is not something that is part of the Hindu thought. Why don't you teach them the Gita? Why don't you teach them the Upanishads? And now you have so many Hindu temples in America, and yet in classes on religion, they don't take them to the temple. They give us some quote from some old book. I don't want to go through my debates with academia. We have a lot of things there. But in Hindu studies, you'll rarely find a practicing Hindu there. In Islamic studies and Christian studies, you will have Christians and Muslims there. Unfortunately, and this is I'm going to the India side, I also write about those things. But what happened in India, you had the independence movement with all these great gurus. But the people who took power after independence through Prime Minister Nehru were socialist communists, and they wrote the textbooks of India with a soft spot for socialism and communism and a dislike of Hinduism. That is why you have these distortions where Hindu children are taught who all the different Mughal rulers were. They don't know who Ramakrishna was. They don't know who, even you go back, they don't know all these great teachers that have been there. They don't know the Mauryas, the Guptas, whatever it is. So these things have been there. And in the West, this is a point I'd like to raise too. When I was a kid, we were taught that the Native Americans were savages who massacred wagon trains. Now we've learned to at least honor their traditions to some degree. And throughout the world, there's been a revision of appreciating Native and Indigenous traditions from the old colonial distortions to recognizing their value. But we still see that the same colonial views about Hinduism exist: caste, cows, curry, whatever it is, sati, these things. They don't talk about yoga Vedanta, they don't even recognize that yoga is Hindu. And where does it come from? Patanjali is a Smriti tradition inside that. So there needs to be a new education going on, and you need to teach the children what these traditions are. And we have very good teachers, Swami Dayananda, Arshavidya, they put a very good set of books for children, Chinmayananda, all these good. Swami Narayan is very good at teaching their children. I've been to so many of their temples. For the children come in, they have 2,000 kids there. And they're involved in seva, they're involved in all these things. So the Hindu community has to be more proactive, but a Hindu voice has to be raised. In America, please note the Hindu American Foundation. Sometimes people say Hindus should not be political, as if it's bad. Every other group is political. I'll give you an example. If you study lobbyists at a political level relating to different religions, all over the world, you have thousands of Muslim lobbyists, Jewish lobbyists, Christian lobbyists. There's only one Hindu lobbyist organization, the Hindu American Foundation. And yet you're told you shouldn't be political. Politics is part of the currency of where we live. Politics determines laws. If you don't vote, who is going to support you? You can be the best community in terms of paying taxes, not going to jail, respecting laws. But if you don't vote, and if you don't vote on your issues, you won't be acknowledged. Recently, there was a campaign Half did for remembering 50 years of the Bangladesh war, in which up to 3 million people, predominantly Hindus, were massacred. It's almost been removed from the textbooks. It's not given any attention, but raising that issue, they were able to get various organizations to do that. You have to recognize, if you're living in this world, Hindu Dharma has to be as political, as economic, as educational based, as media based as anyone else. And that is just part of surviving in the world in which you live. You honor, you respect, but the Hindu view needs to be there. Instead of having somebody who is an anti-Hindu saying why Hindus do this and why Hindus do that. And if we put the Hindu Dharma in an understandable modern language like the Yoga Vedanta movements have done, people take it up all over the world. And that is what we see. But here's another interesting point that I've noted, that some people say, oh, don't worry about it, we'll take care of itself. Most of the countries of the world, Hinduism is not a legal religion, not even in Russia. I'm not even certain about France. UK it is, and all these countries where Hindus stay. But all the other religions are legal. So it's very important you have legal status, you have political status, you have economic status. That is the world in which you live. And India, you can recognize, America is recognized as a Christian country predominantly. India is predominantly Christian. Now let me tell you, even Iran, all these Islamic countries, there's so many Islamic countries. If you can recognize that a country can be Islamic, you can have an Islamic state, you can have all these things. Why is it dangerous or wrong for Hindus to say India is a Hindu majority, or the Indian civilization, which is one of the great civilizations of the world, is historically predominantly Hindu? And what do people honor in India? They go to India for yoga, for meditation, for mantra, for rituals. You know, it's very sad. Going into Kerala, outside an Ayurvedic school, they were putting up, guess what? This is what they put up around the universities, pictures of Che Guevara. Not Shankara, not Guru Narayan, not their own teachers. They're brainwashing them when they think it's cool to wear a Che Guevara shirt, not to have Shiva, all of that. So it's important to recognize there is a culture, a heritage. I don't want to go into the rest of what I do, but just very briefly. We're also honoring India as a culture and as a civilization. And in that regard, India has preserved its civilization. China hasn't. China's Marxist. The Islamic world, there were pre-Islamic traditions. The Christian world, there were pre-Christian traditions. The Native American, native traditions are surviving, but barely. We have friends here. They live an hour outside, less than an hour outside of Albuquerque, in a small Native American community. There are 19 different missionary activities operating in their community, often targeting their children. That is the reality of the world in which you live. So Hindus have to have their point of view. They have to express it, even assert it if it's not being heard, with respect, with regard, with knowledge of diversity, but not with being apologetic. India as a civilization needs to be preserved. You have all these festivals. Other countries used to have them, they don't anymore. You are preserving a great spiritual heritage of humanity. I went to Bali recently. Hinduism was there. You go to other parts of the world, same types of traditions were there. So it's important that you preserve these and universalize them, honor them, and understand their greater yogi.
The phrase I think what he meant is
No, actually, I want to really thank Dr. Frawley for a very honest answer. He hit the nail right on the head. And this is exactly what, I have read some of your readings. So that's a great answer, Doctor. Thank you very much. Can we go to another one?
No, I have no question.
Okay.
I think that was basically what you meant.
Yes.
Despite all the knowledge and all that, you're still losing the identity. Right. Okay, so
you're right.
How do you build the identity?
Okay, how can we build the identity? That's very important. And you recognize the identity. There is the Hindu identity. This Sarva Dharma Samabhava is been confused. It says that all religions are the same. They're not. All religions we should respect diversity and freedom, but there's as much diversity in religion as there is in music and dance and science and law. All aspects of human life have diversity. And all traditions don't teach the same thing. I was raised as a Catholic. I never heard the term Atman. I never heard of meditation or mantra. I never heard of karma or rebirth. Or if I did, I was told these things were heretical. Let these different philosophies exist, but they don't all teach the same thing. It does matter. In fact, it's the most important principle we have for the mind is viveka. Viveka or discernment. It's also the basis of vairagya and nirodha. You have to have discernment, right? You have discernment in the job you want to get. You have discernment in the relationships you want to have. You have discernment in the food you're going to buy, the medicines you're going to take. The spiritual teachings you're following, you should have the highest level of discernment. Upanishads say as sharp as the edge of a razor. You don't just go to the store and buy the first thing on the shelf and eat it. You have to know what's good for you. So too, you don't say all spiritual teachings are the same, take any road, you will get there. That's not true. The road will only take you as far as it goes. We emphasize the Guru Shishya, the Kurukulam the transmission. We honor many paths, but for example, we hold to the law of karma. If another tradition doesn't believe in the law of karma, we don't agree. You know, you may, that can be your opinion if you wish, but law of karma is not negotiable for us under Sarvadharma, Samabhava. And any book, any teaching, you know, there are good teachings, there are good paths, bad paths. Be discerning and be broad, be universal, but you have to affirm your own identity and your own traditions. There are great people everywhere, but in terms of the Hindu tradition, there are these great gurus, there are these great traditions that definitely need to be sustained and that have global relevance today that is going to continue to grow. Hariom.
So I have one question. I was wondering for someone my age, how with the text to really understand, like where to start to really understand, and also how to educate, I guess, people around you who perhaps don't know that much about what your practice is.
Mm-hmm. Well, there should be, I think there are to some degree, there should be some basic courses on Vedanta where you learn the primary principles. The Gita is always a good book to work with because it has the core teachings expressed fairly simply. But I think temples like this should have little classes like that in order to share with people. And a number of the temples throughout the world, in fact, temples were also schools, need to be done. Study the lives of some of the great teachers. Even if you read, a lot of the Indian gurus have produced wonderful works in English, whether it was starting with Vivekananda or Aurobindo. Some can be complex, Chinmayananda, Dayananda, there are simple teachings. But start as what interests you and develop your thought from there. And when people ask you, what does Hinduism teach, then you should be able to explain. Oneself in all beings, you have the great Mahavakyas of the Upanishads, Yoga Sadhana, karma and rebirth. Hinduism today has very good publications on these matters, by the way. It's another organization we've been associated with over there. What is Hinduism? What they did is they created in one of their books, they created a list of all the religions of the world and what does each hold to or believe on this or that particular subject. They didn't say all religions are the same. They didn't say all religions are different, but if you put down their fundamental tenets, it's clear that there's quite a diversity of tenets going on there. And people are into spirituality, the idea of we want to raise our consciousness, universal peace, harmony with nature. You can't say that one theology, one religion, is the only path for everyone. But we recognize oneself in all beings. So we have to learn some of these basic things. And you have to be willing to dialogue and even question in return. Often Hindu children are subject to some sort of attack verbally. Why do you believe in so many gods? Why do you worship cows? Why do you worship idols? Why do you drink urine? These are the kind of questions that they like to throw at you. So you have to understand and be able to explain what the teachings are. And you also have to understand there are certain things in these other traditions that have been questioned, whether it's holy wars, whether it's slavery, all these other things. But I'm not saying you have to fight with them, but you have to know what is going on historically. For example, the British engineered, even, in 1943, the famine in Bengal, several million Indians died, mainly Hindus, because the British took the food for their army instead. For them, the British life was more important. And they did that several times. It's interesting, Shashi Tharoor wrote a very good book on the British. Unfortunately, he didn't write it about the rest of the occupations of India, the genocides that went on over time. So you have to be aware of these things, and you have to be aware of be able to discuss and debate, and even to bring things to the knowledge of teachers. Often the teachers don't know they're teaching. And we say this, if you're going to have Hinduism in a school, take them to temples and let them hear what contemporary gurus are saying. We have a lot of, even Jaggi Vasudev's making a lot of good takes it away, Sri Sri. We have all these teaching, Chinmaya Mission, etc. They've done Swami Narayan. Expose them directly because you're living here. You're not just some museum piece in a textbook that Manusmriti 2,000 years ago in India said, why don't you come to our temple and see what we actually do? You know, why don't you hear what our gurus say today and how they address the problems going on in the world today? And give us some credit. We've given you yoga, we've given you mantra, we've given you meditation, we've given you ahimsa, and we haven't invaded you for that. We haven't tried to convert you for that. We haven't asked for your money for that. And we're the most, well, probably the most affluent and peaceful of the communities in America. And we're well educated, so why don't we be given our place and raise these issues? You'll get a response because people are open-minded if they have, if you present things the right way.
We are going to be winding up very shortly, and we'll have dinner shortly. So there's one or two questions. Doctor, can we take a couple of more questions?
Go ahead.
So one question on Zoom from Jasmine is, what are different names and purposes of mind in yoga?
Different what?
Names and purposes of mind in yoga.
Names and names and purposes of mind. Okay. Okay. Well, what we have, as we've said in the Yoga Vedanta tradition, we've had a tremendous study of the mind through meditation and states of consciousness beyond the mind. So there's some differentiation of function there relative to different aspects of the mind. For example, you have the buddhi as the higher discerning intelligence. So you have different names that are used, and there are also different levels or different types of samadhi, savikalpa, nirvikalpa, sabija, nirbija. It's a whole science to it. And there's an interrelationship. There's the importance of sankalpa, there's the importance of mantra. So what we have in the West is we, for example, in the West today, we generally identify brain, mind, and consciousness. Mind is a function of the brain, consciousness is a function of the mind. In the yogic thought, there are three different but related things. Brain is an instrument for the mind. Mind is an instrument for consciousness. Consciousness is universal and transcendent. And there are terms like chit is consciousness, chitta manas, there are different terms for mind. These have been explored in great detail experientially, and so they can make these types of discernments. So in yoga, you're making the mind sattvic in order to transcend the mind into the pure consciousness. And we also recognize you're not just, it's very funny, we're so physical today, and yet mainly we're living in non-physical reality. You're on your cell phone, you're on your webinar, you're traveling to a different country, you have an identity at different levels. So we also in Hindu Dhamma recognize there are subtle realities, astral plane, causal plane, worlds of thought, worlds of imagination. So our view of the universe cosmology is also much broader. These are also all part of the yogic view of who we are and what the universe is. So I hope I've addressed that a bit, Hariam.
That's it. Any other questions?
I just have one statement.
Absolutely.
I've given responses to your questions. I haven't given answers. You have to find the answers to your questions, and you have to find them resonating and working inside of yourself. It's not information from the outside. And what we're looking at, you need a change of consciousness, a change of being that embraces the universe as a whole. Amen.
That was very inspiring. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot very much, Dr. Frawley. And we had good discussion, good question answer. I hope we are all a little more spiritually awakened. And I've read a lot of his tweets and articles on Hinduism. I think, I must say that, he probably, Dr. Frawley, I hate to say it, but he is such a proud Hindu that some of us may not be able to be there. You know, we are born Hindu, he is born Catholic, he is converted. By reading his articles, I think I need to be there, and we are not there yet. Okay, so please continue our search for strong Hinduism. So I want to really thank Dr. Frawley for coming here. He drove himself here and spent time with us, couple of hours. So really appreciate. We are looking forward to a nice relations between your institute, you and our temple.
Well, I must say, I'm very impressed by your questions and also by your attention.
So we have a few vote of thanks for people who have worked hard. We got some sponsors for the event, and I would rather say that, you know, some of the ladies who made the dinner, I must mention their name: Visa, Ratnaji, Anjaliji, Anju Jaiswal, and Madhvi. So a big hand of applause for the cooks. We'll have the dinner. And we have some few sponsors. We have some sponsors who have helped support this event and support the temple. Anjanaji Singh, Mohan Sapori, Subha Swamiji, Krishnaji, and Madhvi. So appreciate all their effort and help. There are some people in the audience who would like to come and present a little token to Dr. Frawley. So I'll let Ratnaji come and give her a flower basket, and Neelaji, you can come next. Fruit basket. Can you carry it? Okay.
I've given as a soul food. Now I'm giving to the body food.
Wait a minute, you should come out there.
Oh,
Look, come over here so we can.
everything is
Yeah.
healthy food.
So you can take a picture. No.
Neelaji. And we have from our temple, we have a little token for you. And a little honorarium. Okay, so we will rearrange the furniture so that we can have some sit-down dinner here. So please, you know, help with that. And in the meantime, take a break, drink some water, let Dr. Frawley calm down for a few minutes, relax, and then we'll have some dinner.